There's a lot of pieces that are Web3. There's a lot of pieces that are Web2, and providing an easy way to onboard and assimilate all those different pieces without having to be an expert in all of them, I think would be a good piece here. I will pass it to Pam.
Me? I would say, much the same. I think when we talked about the mission for the TEC, we identified like the 3 key categories as education, research, and like open source tools. I think those are really they stand the test of time. Those are still the public goods for token engineering, I think. And I will pass to Rex.
Okay. I don't have as formally set on what exactly is a public good, because I think there's a lot of things we're calling public goods which may be merit goods, and there's like but that's like a technicality. Yes, so I'd like to skip this one. Who else hasn't gone yet? Gideon, how about you?
Thanks, Rex. Yeah, I come back to this idea of expertise, like token engineering expertise, and sometimes that expertise gets embedded in the human brain. That's education. Sometimes that expertise is being like discovered and applied as like research, and then sometimes it gets embedded, in software as protocols and other, coding. So I think it does go back to some, basically the research, education, and tools. So I agree with Tam. But I think of it as kind of even behind that as like expertise, token engineering expertise. And then I think the other thing, like public, what is public? Public is, it's available for everybody. And I'm also really interested in this idea of like common goods, like commons goods, like goods that are there to support a commons, and they are they have the kind of economics behind them that supports paying back, like paying back to the people who came before and helped develop those things, and keeping that kind of like within a commons. So I think that's also a really interesting idea. I will pass it to Chewy.
Thanks, Eden. I think that like a good token engineering public good, maybe it's like a little bit simple, but I think that good practices in general, I feel that if, like there is like some kind of voice that makes like a deeper dive in like expertise in just like good decisions, responsible decisions around tokenomics, I feel that that could be like a really great way like to summarize like the mission of the TEC, just like a manual or a summary of like good practices, and having the opportunity to like associate the that idea with the TEC. And I'll pass it to Jean.
Thanks, Joey. In terms of a token engineering public good, I think perhaps something like just a concept of consensus of any sort would be something that would be a great public good. Some form of agreement on this is the set of tools that we use, this is the set of practices that we follow, this is the set of principles that we're aligned with. But so I think that that's generally what is being developed here. But yeah, that's what I would think. I don't know who else is going next, so I'll pass it back to Chewy.
I can pass it to Bear for you.
Yeah.
And Grace.
Well, this question, like, I am glad that I had time to think about it, because what is a token engineering public good? When I think of a token engineering public good, I think of the tragedy of the public goods that are the free rider problem, the prisoner's dilemma, that no one wants to be a soccer, the provision and appropriation thing, all of the Ostrom's principles. So what I think is that that's why we are not the token engineering public good, we are the token engineering commons. Somehow we are stewarding and putting boundaries on the token engineering public good. And yeah, what I think of is more of the difference on this question between a public good and a commons, and why we are a commons. And yeah, that's what I think, that we are a commons to avoid that tragedy of like no one stepping up with a clear leadership, or like not having the real boundaries and rules, and not being able to have our own governance. But yeah, I leave it there. And I'll pass it to Livy.
Thank you, Juanca. Yeah, I agree with mostly what everyone said. Education and research and best practices, guidelines, safety practices. And I think of public goods not as something that needs to be free, because I think everything has a cost, and the cost will also always fall on somebody. And I like this distinction that what's his name? Think Like a Commoner. Made of
Boilier.
Yeah, David Boilier, of like when the open source community changed from calling free software to open source, because free gave this impression that had no cost. And yeah, I think it's important for us to think about that. So I think public goods is something that needs to be available and accessible for all of the people in that community who needs those things to be used. So how can we make education, research, guidelines, all of this, like providing all of these things at an accessible cost, and also having availability of reach, like people know where to find.
And I think Bear's the last one.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. Yeah, I basically agree with everyone, with everything that has been said. Yeah, I think research, tools, education are really important. And just something else, maybe just to add to the conversation, I think also is the TEC, and I think that the general Web3 community has a lot of work to do in order to make these concepts and these definitions more clear and more, I guess, universal. I feel like in society today, hearing about public goods, it's not that common, or is something that, yes, that hasn't been talked much, besides politics, and maybe not with the best definition of things. So trying to reshape that into public goods that are actually governed by a commons and by the community itself, I think that's a really interesting concept to expand to the rest of the world. And same thing with token engineering. I think both concepts on its own are their own thing, like are not easy to understand at all. And I think we just have that task of making it easier and clearer for everyone to understand what public goods are, and then what token engineering public goods are as well. Yeah, I'll just pass it back to you, Nate, or to Tam. I don't know.
Should I take it?
Tam, take it. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thanks for that question, Nate. That was actually really nice. Just a refresher for all of us. Yes, sorry, did we not share this? We even dropped that. Okay, sorry about that, Wonka. Okay, so Nate and I prepared a little agenda for us today. Please feel free to add anything that you want to this. We're going to run out of time. We're not going to cover all of this. Let me say that right now. We have about 47 minutes left. So how to phase out a working group. So we have some working groups that are sort of stewardless right now, some working groups that are phasing out on their own in a, I would say, non-controlled fashion. So they just kind of disappear, but we still have Discord channels and, it's still on the website, and we still have calendar entries in the calendar. So we'd like to provide just a nice way for working groups to sort of go through a checklist to, let me see. Oh, Nate, good, you're sharing it. To go through and maybe I'm going to share it too, actually, so I could talk while I'm moving it. Working group retirement. So this started as like a pretty rough list that Nate turned into like a really nice checklist, just the things that a working group should consider as they're retiring their working group or sunsetting. I'm coming to the word sunsetting as a nice way to sort of end the working group's life cycle. This is a draft, so please feel free to hop into the document and, add some suggestions or edits. It is not the final. Yes, I can definitely do that. Gideon, sorry, that's not done already. Anyone on the link can. Oh, I cannot do that. Sorry. I think this is owned by Nate. Is this owned by you, Nate?
Yep, it is. My bad.
No
Let me
problem.
change it.
Okay, cool. So, so the idea is basically it's a draft. Hopefully we won't take us more than the rest of the week to get it finalized into a version that Transparency, SoftGov, Communitas will all be using pretty much right away to just make sure that they've considered the learnings from the working group, the financial aspects, what they're going to do with the rest of the funds. We can maybe have some more conversations about that here. Any documentation that they need, any of the responsibilities that are not going to be assumed, like, so there's some responsibilities that they want continuity with to find the person who can pick up that task, and just to make it clear to everybody who will be helping with that. Any other information, notifying the community of the sunsetting of the working group, of course, so things stay very transparent. And then maybe there's other things, any other considerations that are particular to that working group. Maybe we could also have a space for that. SoftGov might have some particular desire for how to continue discussions around governance. So yeah, please feel free to make some edits and improve that document. Septimus said he would get to it this week, so I think he's going to get started on it pretty soon. And then Maxwell had this really good idea about just going through each working group and getting a status check on each working group. So we made a really, really simple, just like go through the list, know where things are. There are some working groups that are starting to sunset themselves. Transparency was, realizing that basically the scope of their work is like to do these 3 things, and that we don't need an entire working group around that. And we don't need a steward around this piece of work, but maybe these are operational tasks that can be passed to a smaller group to work on operational tasks across all the TEC. So for Communitas, to be quite honest, I went to check on the Communitas channel to see an update on Communitas, and I saw, a message that's like, hey, is there this Communitas happening today? And then Costa responded, I was there for 10 minutes, no one showed up. So in my mind, I thought, okay, so Communitas is probably over. Maybe it's nice for us to go through a structured sunsetting for that working group to make it very clear and organized as we get rid of that working group and transfer responsibilities. I think that there's still some tasks in that working group or pieces of work that had made sufficient advancement that they can be picked up later, even if they're paused for now. So Nate accepted to sort of be the point person for this. So we'll work with the active contributors or the contributors who've worked in Communitas to help put together this sort of sunset plan for Communitas. And Septimus, as I already mentioned, will do transparency. Livia is going to do this exercise for SoftGov. I think we should find some interesting things come out of this exercise as well, especially the working group learnings and any other I really think that this isn't like, just a checkbox. It's really more like, what has this working group learned, and how can you bring some information and learnings back? It's a little bit of both. It's like a checkbox just to make sure that the calendar entry's off the calendar, so it's not confusing. Your Discord channel is archived, but it's also like, hey, what have we learned from this working group? What can you share with the rest of the community? So that's the purpose. Maybe we talk about the other working groups. So I would say Omega. Maybe I would say there's probably people in this room who have a much better handle on Omega and what Omega is doing now than I do. So would anyone like to volunteer, or shall I just ask Nate to give an update? Okay. So what I can say is Omega doesn't have a steward. It's sort of it's a working group that continues to move forward. Shebnem has been telling us for a few months now. She's like, I have to stop being a steward. There's too much stuff I'm doing. So in August, she did stop. And so I'm not really 100% sure what's happening with this working group, but I'll pass to Nate to give an update.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting part of this is that the participants in the Omega working group still get together very frequently to talk about it, and they kind of mimic what we kind of are striving to build with interest groups. And so I think they're a prime example of that, to actually push forward a trial of how do we set up an interest group, how do we reorganize them in a way that actually gets us closer to what we want to do. And so I've talked with several of them, and they're very willing to participate in the interest group. Outside of that, they do have some work streams that they're actively working on, in which, by all means, keep working on them. That's just kind of what their initiatives are. And so I want to be able to support that. And I think we should support them in that, if they want to keep doing that and not have to forcefully retire them. But it would be nice to get some, closure in terms of what was different about Omega, because Omega was very, very different in terms of being separated from the core group of the working groups that we did traditionally have. They're very independent, and so that was an interesting element to it. So, outside of that, I'm not sure. Something we have to talk with Seb about.
Yeah, and maybe a point of reflection is like, what is the difference between a working group and an interest group? Is it just that it doesn't have, one single person stewarding it, or is there more differences? But I think that could be very.
Answer that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point of reflection is like, hey, I don't have the answer for that, other than, there's a lot of like ethics in TE. It's an interest, and it was like a working group that formed around this one interest. And so maybe operating as a, self-directed interest group does make a lot of sense. And Gideon, I don't know if you want to say any words about Sampo.
Yeah, sure, Tam.
Proactive.
So, most of our work right now is really just focused on rolling out this curation service. I mean, that's pretty much what we're focused on. We have a meeting, once a week on Wednesdays where we're, focusing on that. To be honest, I would say that, the calls on Sampo lately have been thinking kind of more bigger picture. The past couple of weeks, trying to figure out some of this stuff, talking with people, just kind of like a vetting space for people to kind of share ideas about this stuff. I do think, so we've been pretty careful with our budget. So we have some leftover budget. If we wanted to use that budget, it's kind of like a way, we could just give the budget back, what's remaining, or we could use it as a bridging strategy to kind of like basically pay for some of these ongoing urgent and important functions that we need to do. I think, either one of those is fine. That's like a more pragmatic thing, but I think the cleaner thing is probably to just give it back to the common pool. I do think that there is a need for continued economic development stuff, but I think that could probably roll into that core team too.
Cool, thanks for that. And then, I'll take the stewards. I think that, when I'm creating, or when I was helping Zep first draft the sunsetting document and then speaking with Nate and having Nate improve it so much, of course, I'm like, well, how do we sunset the stewards working group? And the one thing that I think is the biggest responsibility is like, what does our coordination look like? We've coordinated across multiple working groups with multiple stewards using Zen Hub and this like sort of weekly cadence and a stewards council for a discussion group. I think that we could say we've already said we're gonna pause that, but I think having an absence of coordination is going to be counterproductive. So I'm very interested in any ideas that people have around, hey, how do we go back to like managing this and coordinating all of the work streams to get us through the transformation to the other side of the tunnel. So that's really on my mind. And I think that there's a few people in this room who have some good ideas, and I'd love to talk more about that as well. Maybe we go back to Zen Hub, maybe we use Notion. I've seen so many great team tools and Kanban boards on Notion that are super simple and very effective. Same with Clarity. I know that the Sampo group has used that and really liked it as well. But and then this idea of servant leadership and passing the culture. There's a lot I think that the stewards working group have done that should go on in continuity. And I think as on my own, I'll make it, or with Nate's help, and together with Nate, we could do a little exercise on like how do we pass those things and where do we pass those things. But it's premature for us to sort of start sunsetting now, I would say. And then we have the comms working group. I don't know, Chewy, if you want to sort of give an update on comms.
Can I say,
Yes,
can I
Tom.
say something
Yes.
about that
Yeah.
before I pass? Yeah, I think I really enjoyed how things came together this week, for example, for us to like change this name of the calendar and set up this agenda and the board that Bear put together. I feel like there was an organic coordination that was spinned up, and perhaps during the transition, we could experiment with this cadence of like our only coordination point is these meetings we're having twice a week and see how it goes. And then as things flow, see the necessity of like, oh, maybe there was things that were said that were going to be done and there was no accountability. Like, can we bring awareness and actively observe how this next couple of weeks will go with the transition to then decide on a coordination model? That's all I wanted to share. I'll pass to you, Chewy.
Maybe I can just jump into. I mean, my immediate reaction is I already feel the pain a little bit because things aren't transparent and open and obvious. Nobody knows, like, there's a list that I have and a list that you have and a list that Gideon has. And I think that having one place where everyone can see what everyone is doing and understand the interdependencies was really important for us. But I do think we could take a few weeks and see which we gravitate towards, which makes the most sense. I don't think it needs like, okay, tomorrow we're starting to use Notion. I think we can, do some experimentation, but yeah, I think it would behoove us a lot to have a lot of transparency back in our planning and our calls. I mean, for everyone. Does that make sense?
Just a quick thing. I think that this is like an important topic, like coordination moving forward. I don't know if we'll have enough time to maybe talk more deeply about it today, but maybe it's a good topic for next call, definitely.
I honestly think we could have a whole call about coordination. So I agree to sort of pin it. Sorry, pin it for now and bring it up in another form. I do agree with that too. Cool. Welcome, Simon. And I'll pass to you, Chewy, to give the update.
Okay, so on communications, I'm taking care of a couple of documents that fall very closely to this guide for retiring the working group. What I think maybe like a variation is accountability on like the like similar to what Gideon was mentioning about like giving back the funds or like discussions around it. However, because comms used to be more like spread regarding funding because of the teams, we are like returning these funds. The biggest one is going to be probably marketing, although we're still figuring out like some stuff that we could be doing, or like how we can how the forum post and the other document that I'm working in can be part of the discussion, or kind of like start the discussion so that we can take some things in account. However, there are 2 multi-sigs that are already well, the remaining funds are already back in the common pool, which are the comms stewarding multi-sig and also the translations multi-sig. Both of those have already sent the remaining funds back to the common pool, and I'm including also like the transactions and all of that in this document. So this first document is mostly a forum post that is going to be following the retiring guidelines. Also, I'm thinking of putting together like a document that, I mean, it could be named a manifesto, but Gideon and I were also discussing like some of the confusion that this brings because we're not going to be like really a working group. However, I feel that it might be a good idea to have a document that could, you know, like if some people approached the TEC with, you know, like this will to contribute to communications, just like a document that can say, hey, like, I mean, probably not giving a lot of explanations about funding, but maybe creating more a little bit of like some game theory with the praise system or something that, you know, like can keep people slightly incentivized to, you know, like maybe get their feet like into the water with regarding like contributing to communications, and also something that establishes and says like, reminds like what the mission, vision, values are, and just something so that people, you know, like have kind of like an introduction and have like at least like a broad idea of how to contribute to communications the right way. So it would be not a manifesto, but I'm calling it like a TEC communications contributors guide. So yeah, just so that there's something there, you know, for because I mean we're not gonna have communitas, we're not gonna have like communications, more like regular weekly call. So just so that not dropping the ball on anyone that maybe has like some influence or are influencers themselves and are willing to help out communications around the TEC. And yeah, I think that's it. It's mostly around accountability with transparency and in funds handling that I'm focusing more into. And other than that, I feel that we're falling in a very close path to this one that this boarding process is suggesting. So I'll pass it to, Mitch is not here, but okay.
Actually,
Yeah.
Before you go in, I just wanted to ask a question real quick to both you, Chewy, and to the rest of the community in terms of the funds that are remaining in the multi-sig wallets. Is this something that we want to, during this transition process, allow the individual working groups to make a decision on where they send those funds? Or do we want to come to a collective agreement on how to manage the funds that are already outside of the common pool? I say this just because extracting funds from the common pool are going to be continuously more difficult as time moves on, and it's not like we won't be able to use those funds for productive purposes as we move past this transition.
Maybe I can start with that. We originally intended to, you know, like take 2 steps back and maybe like work on another proposal, and we were thinking about like, you know, like asking the community what they thought of, or maybe if the right move was to send back the funds and then reapply with another proposal. But I think that by now, because of this hibernation mode that we're gonna be working, I personally think that maybe we could use some of the current funds that we have to kind of like keep this thing going, but not in a way that is going to be, I mean, you know, like there's close to, I think, like 18K or something like that in the marketing multisig. I mean, when we used to talk about like another reapproach and another proposal, probably we were thinking around like half of that. But right now, like, I mean, in from what I've been talking with Gideon, I feel that this amount would be much less. And the idea is to, you know, like kind of like count on this to be funded, but also like being, you know, like completely transparent about the process and everything, and completely open to, you know, like if somebody in the community doesn't agree with this, we could definitely look into, you know, like just giving back all of the funds and reapplying with a new proposal from scratch. Although I don't know if this is gonna like generate like some delays, so that maybe we could, you know, like jump into this mode like straight away and not, you know, like delay it with another proposal process. But those are my like 2 cents on that part.
Welcome, Griff. Welcome, NT. Happy you can join. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Nate, your question was like not, hey, what is comms doing, but like, what is every working group and should we try to enforce? Look, if I'm going to give you my honest opinion, I think it's the working group who decides. I think we can say what we recommend strongly and provide rationale for why we recommend that. If you have a strong recommendation and rationale to share, please do. But I think, you know, there's a few things that I think, right? Like the first is there is some amount of continued operations, and for this transfer of responsibilities to do. So I think the working group will need to sort of provide that, and it is in this sunsetting doc, right? Like what is the financial obligations? I think is what was called in there, but it's like, hey, what is the cost of this transition even happening to pass on these responsibilities to another person or another group? But so, you know, I don't know so my feeling is that the rest would be sent to the Commons pool. I'm feeling pretty like that's what I've felt for a while. Though I think that there's some, you know, if there's there's not much funds in the stewarding working group. There's 600 XDI, and maybe that gets used for helping this transition into, you know, maybe that's something like, you know, but I think it makes sense for the steward of the working group, if there is a steward of the working group, to explain what that funds will be used for, and it should be directionally aligned with where we're going, if that makes sense. Do you have a different opinion you want to share?
No. This is something that, you know, whether it's left up to the individual working groups and the stewards of that working group to decide where those funds were initially going, that they're now going to go back to the common pool for redistribution, or if we can all come to a collective agreement that says, hey, you know, there's some funds that we could be using for this transition process that we don't need to have a separate proposal because the money's already out of the common pool. I don't know if that's a violation of what community expectations or standards or whatever we want to have in terms of transparency. We can make it known, but I do think it is a big burden in a lot of ways to go through that proposal process and extracting funds from the common pool in a whole nother proposal. So,
well, just very quickly, I think money-wise, we should probably just put this question later down the road. I don't think we have enough information, or we know yet what are we going to do to know how are we going to, you know, making a decision on that. And so I think we're better off just keeping everything on the multi-sigs, paying for whatever expenses we have currently anyways. And then once we know what we're going to actually do, then we can, you know, maybe put back the money on the common pool, or maybe we take it for the next stage of the TEC, and probably with, I don't know, with a snapshot proposal or something, just to get everyone on check. But yeah, probably just too early to decide.
I just want to say, in the ideal world, it's like Tamara's decided what we do. Now I do advice process. Hey, stewards, I'm thinking of returning these funds to the commons pool, or I'm thinking of using these funds to, you know, engage a PM for this period. does it like what, and then sort of get advice process and be able to then make the best decision. That would be, I think, ideal.
That would make a lot of sense. I mean, in my eyes, it's yeah. The optimal solution would be either to just return all the funds or give some sort of transparent, transparent. Whether it's the advice process or the forum post and so on, just explaining exactly where those funds are going to be going, because ultimately the voters decided on one direction for these funds, and well, though the working group does have some freedom, and we shouldn't encroach on that. The voters didn't decide to maybe move like from one work. Yeah, they didn't decide to like move all of these funds to something completely different. So then I think that there needs to, we can't just like do like the. I'm not sure whether the working group should just do that movement themselves. I think they should probably like do some sort of forum post and wait for anybody to disagree before doing something like that moves away from that, just transferring them back to common pool.
Any other thoughts to share?
I could just say, I think so. One thing, there's a part of me that's like just wants to be very pragmatic about this, and then there's a part that's like we need to follow the process, right? So the pragmatic part of me is like, you know what? It feels like this is a little bit kind of echoing what Anti's saying. It's like I feel like we just need to finish the job that we started last week of like, let's finish the urgent, important tasks and figure out like what are the things that we really cannot drop, otherwise things start to break badly. And then just like figure out some interim strategy that's like, how do we, like if we stop tweeting, that's probably not going to be good, And if there's a bunch of these things that we have already identified, just figure out some way to like do some type of bridge funding, so that we make sure that people aren't having to do that for free. Like that we can pay people to do that work. It's good, it's honest work. It's like needs to happen. So figure that out, and then whatever is left. For me personally, I think that Sampo, like I would just say we'll probably give it back. But like I guess what I'm saying is, I think we should be focused on a pragmatic interim period where we just got to figure out how to pay people to do the critical stuff.
Okay. Any other thoughts or comments about this before we move on? Okay, then I'm going to jump in because I think Chewy raised some really interesting points that I wanted to just sort of double click on for a minute. And the one is, this idea of helping contributors figure out how they can still contribute to the communications of TEC, not necessarily the communications working group, but like how to help communications in TEC. I think the working group has amassed so much knowledge there and is the best working group to produce that, so I think that's one of these, like, in this working group retirement, it's like, what are the learnings from the working group? I feel like that's the perfect place to add that kind of thing. We learned that these are the kinds of tasks that people can easily pick up, or like all of that, I think, is so important for us to be able to capture and keep in the sort of like, knowledge of what we've experienced. Even if there's something like, not a full-on style guide, but like some kind of like styling for the TEC, and what the comms group has really been able to solidify in that respect too. And then you said the word hibernation, so I just want to touch on that for a minute. I was talking earlier with Gideon, and I was like, my framing of this is that, the size of this commons, if this was a traditional nonprofit organization, there would be 2 full-time people, maybe 3 full-time people, and a few volunteers and advisors and, patrons and all that thing that comes around a nonprofit. And so I really think we're just sizing right. We're coming down to the size of this size organization. and this mission. So I really feel like, I don't think we're going into a hibernation mode. I just think that this size commons, our economy, we didn't have the revenue coming in to support 10 working groups and 15 stewards. So we need to say, when we have revenue that comes in to support that size of an organization, that's when we have that size of an organization. But we don't have that yet. And so we need to like right size, build that, and then we can start to grow again. So that's my framework. I actually think this is super positive, the direction that we're going in, to be able to support ourselves and sustain this organization. And then from that place, grow and grow and grow. Triggered me with the word hibernation, Chewy. But and that's why I think it's like there's these key tasks and comms that are crucial to the TEC. I mean, crucial to the TEC. And so like passing those on is really important. So I want to check. So, okay, so I think we could say also sunsetting, and thank you for starting this work before we even had this document together, Chewy. Maybe we could learn from your document too. Maybe there's things in there that we could roll into this. Maybe if you have time and you want to look this over and be like, you forgot this one, since you're going through that process now already, that would be awesome.
I mean, I can share a draft with anyone who's interested. But I have to warn you, Tam. Like the first part is like a whole analogy on hibernation, and it's like this. Like I think I mentioned it to a few people, but the idea is to approach it as like this, like the 2001: A Space Odyssey, but like kind of like a token engineering odyssey, right? Where we do have this mission. It's clear we have the lessons. We have the expertise within our community, but not at this moment. Like right now, we're like in the middle of a ship, and only a few astronauts are necessary to keep the ship running, and not drain all of the resources that we have. So that's what I meant by hibernation. But I do agree with you on not being like a literal hibernation, right?
I would love to see it, and I won't pound my table as I'm reading it. You're on mute. Were you saying something?
Oh, sorry. I'll just said I'll send it to you.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Okay, and then reward systems. We don't have feedback. Mitch isn't here. Anyone want to share sort of reward systems, their perspective? I had a chat with Christopher about it, just to be like, hey, what is reward system doing? Are they doing like active development? Are they doing this operational, making sure that rewards goes through like the thankless work that Mitch is doing, making sure that there are quantifiers and there are distributions, and that people are aware that they have to finish their quantification before the period ends. The feedback that Christopher gave me was it's more or less operational now. The rewards working group in the TEC is really just making sure that praise and distributions happen in the TEC. I don't know if anyone has any other. Yeah, Maxwell.
Yeah, so I'll chime in because the reason I asked, I suggested kind of this exercise is because I've mainly only been in reward system, and it's been chugging along, and so all of a sudden I was hearing about changes, and I was like, what do you mean? It's been chugging along. And so yeah, it is very operational. There's a few things going on around. So I think the piece Nate mentioned about it becoming longer, more delayed, getting funds out of common pool, right? So as of right now, the rewards work group for praise funding looks like it's going to run out because it had the last source credit distribution and stuff like that. So there's a new funding proposal. I don't know if that's going to end up passing in time, right? So there's a post up around adjusting some of those distributions to make that last a little bit longer, and just to right size with the engagement in praise, right? But yeah, very operational, and quantifiers are still engaged, and yeah.
Thanks for that update. What a nice surprise. Anything anyone else wants to add about reward system? Okay.
Also,
So
the analysis that Rex has been doing that are really interesting too, that are not so operational, but are also standing on its own.
Yes,
yeah,
absolutely.
super impressive.
Thanks. I'd say also, yeah, rewards has adjusted. It has like the Chris and Max's write up as well on and the analysis that I was in a Quantify call earlier today, and that's what Max and Mitch were looking at some other analyses. I believe Livy, you've been on it too. So I'd say like rewards has already kind of made the transition to become sustainable with the latest post, the one that came after mine, on changing the mechanisms for rewards in the TC so that funds can last a while longer. So I think that yeah, rewards has been the first to adjust. I think that it will stand almost in its current form.
Okay, well then maybe we could hop to Wonka, and Wonka, if you want to give an update on Gravity.
Sure. Well, I was thinking that maybe Gravity is in a different phase between sunsetting and active. And because I see that what we are trying to do is to DAOify. And to become a DAO, we need to stop being also a working group. But at the same time, I feel that we are not mature enough to have our own infrastructure. So we are like in a hatching phase inside of the TEC, where we are like nurturing from the knowledge of the TEC, nurturing from the resources of the common pool, of the goodwill of the community, to DAOify this thing that started as a working group. So I don't know. It's also an interesting thing. I've been gardening a lot these past weeks, and I've just come to my mind with this idea, and is that like yeah, to reproduce cactuses, they grow from the cactus, and when they are mature enough, you can take them out and just put it in the soil. I feel that right now we are not still ready to be placed in the soil, but we are like growing as a lump on the TEC and using its infrastructure, its Discord, its community. But then we will try to like be our own community and have our own infrastructure. So it's like yeah, living in the house of your parents, and I don't know. It's also a sunsetting phase in a way, but also a very active phase. So I don't know.
Thanks for sharing that. I think that was very honest. Go ahead, I open the floor.
Oh, I just wanted to say, I'm not sure if a cactus is the right analogy, right? Say the community is more like mycelia, right? It'll never, like, if something wrong happens in like we will stay together, we'll be connected, however far apart gravity stays.
Yeah, it's just like what I had in mind, but it's like an analogy. But yeah, we will always be very, very close to this community.
So I just want to say one thing. We have 9 minutes left. And I want to say, I think Gravity is a very interesting use case in the TEC. And like coordination, I think we could spend an hour or more talking about it. So unless anyone objects, I would propose we just sort of pin this for a future discussion and then allow Chewy and Livia to present the Stewards Working Group Learning Board. I think that would be super helpful. But I just also want to not, if anyone wants to say anything about Gravity, I think that now is a great time. But I'd say we can also spend one of these entire sessions working through what that can look like, the relationship between Gravity and TEC.
I agree with you. I just wanted to say quickly, where's legal in this one? I think legal's missing out of the list that I've got.
What is missing?
Legal.
We don't have a working group.
Yeah. There's a multi-sig with funds, so
we technically do. The legal working group was set up for a kind of a rainy day fund for anything that happens in the legal realm. So Ivy was, and Griff, I believe, were heading up that working group for a while, but it was never formalized, I don't think. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Rex. I think that's a really good call. Technically, since it still has a multi-sig, we should figure out what that looks like. But yeah. Okay. So then, Lydia, can we pass to you and Chewy for presenting this working group learnings board?
Yeah, I don't want to get into the board now, but just make an invitation for everyone, for all of the stewards and also all of working group participants to gather learnings about, like, so far participating in this working group, stewarding this working groups. What can we bring down in data for us to learn and not repeat the same mistakes, have new mistakes, have insights about what we've done, and to formalize this transition somehow. So this would be like the closing cycle of the stewards working group, and then from what comes up there, understanding the best ways to transition. So I wanted to get what would be the best day for that. Maybe passing a doodle around would be the best thing, or using one of the sessions that we have booked on the calendar already, since everybody said they can participate in this time. And if you want to share anything else, Chewy.
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit more of a like a not a sensitive topic, but a topic about sensitivity. I personally, in reflecting on a lot of like these lessons learned, but from having like acknowledgement on some of the mistakes in the bad decisions over the last few months. I feel that this is something that is, at least in communication, starting to enrich a lot. This document that I mentioned, this kind of like manifesto or guide for communications contributors. So probably this will make a little bit more sense once everything has a more shape. Both the document that I'm working on and also the board. But yeah, it's I just wanted to bring up like the importance of creating a space where we can like openly talk about like maybe like mistakes or bad decisions, reflect on that, and help these shape whatever future the working group or the mission around what the working group used to do for the near future. And yeah.
I will say I would suggest that this be a separate meeting from the normal flow that we're trying to get into for the transition aspects of things. I do think this is really important, but I do think it should be an independent meeting if we can organize that.
I like
Why?
the. Go ahead.
Did you say why?
Yeah, why not using one of the time slots that we know already work for everyone?
I just think there are a lot of tangible things that we can organize around an agenda for actually the transition process in terms of the urgent things that we still have to do, and transferring functions, making sure that a lot of the things that Gideon mentioned before, that the things that we have that need to get done don't break. I really think that we should have our focus on that, as well as, and then having this as a kind of an independent where we can spend maybe an hour even going through this and discussing it. Because I do think this is a big activity. But I do think we should keep the transition process moving.
I am more agnostic. I would say the big question is going to be, there's certain people you want to have in the room at this time. and that's going to be pretty hard to do. So I don't know what time will work for. I don't know that the other people that should be in the room for this could make this hour now. I think it's more about finding, there are people that can really contribute to the learnings, and there's probably, a good 20 people who I think would bring the most value into this. And whenever they can meet is probably the right time to do it. That's my thought.
I would just want to say that we have to, I guess, pick and choose the battles, because I don't think we can afford to spend months on this or whatever. Like, I think we have to be very pragmatic, and so I guess to Nate's point, we have to decide which are things that are absolutely necessary and which are sort of like activities around the transformation that are great to do, but that's not a priority, I guess. And if that means not everyone is going to be able to make it, that's we have to pick and choose.
Okay. So I don't know that we have a clear conclusion on that, other than I think we figure out when people can join. Yeah, maybe a doodle would be best. And there is a lot for us to finish for this transition, and we only have these 2 hours a week. So that maybe is in addition to supporting finding another time that works for everyone to do it. Hey, we have 1 minute left. That's it. That's all we've got. So I knew we would run out of time. We did run out of time. We put some things pinned to the wall for us to talk about next time. And I just want to say one thing. Who wrote this? Calendars clean up ASAP. Who added that? All right. So who wants to? My feeling, the calendar is pretty up to date. I found the transparency one, and Zeptimus took that off right away. Is there any other calendars that you think are not up to date right now? Any other entries? I don't think we have a bunch of those. Maybe Communitas now, in which case we take off Communitas transparency. Livia, if you want to take off SoftGov, now is probably a good time to do it. But I agree that the first step in this sort of sunsetting should be like, if you're going to not have meetings anymore, take it off the calendar. But I'd say, how about we spread the responsibility a little bit on this one? Can everyone just have a sanity check, or 2 or 3 people? I'm happy to have a sanity check. If there's anything on the calendar that I see looks like it's not supposed to be there, I will reach out to somebody to take it off. Or I'll post on the Stewards channel if we could remove it from the calendar. And we're top of the hour. Yay! Okay, see you guys Thursday.
See you. Bye.
Thank
I
you, guys.
removed SoftGov. Can you still see it?
Let me see. I didn't have a look.
I don't see it anymore.
Okay, I'm pretty sure we're pretty up to date, but I'm not, I'd have to check with Omega if that's up to date. Gravity, are yours all up to date? Maybe what I can do is drop a message in the channel, just being like, hey, can you make sure your calendar entries are up to date, and tag all the people that attend those meetings.
I was thinking specifically the community call and the orientation calls. Just like, because we have a community call coming up on Thursday also, and we just need to decide, are we going to do that or not?
That's right. We didn't decide. Damn it. It didn't get on this agenda. I'm sorry about that. Are we having the community call?
I miss it.
I'm saying maybe we have it this Thursday, and we just say, hey, we're thinking, as part of our message to the community, we're going through some transition. We don't have it all figured out. Be patient with us, please. Here are some updates. Keep it short, keep it tight, be honest.
I support that. I mean, I think in the last community call was canceled, and that was effectively the update. We're going to change the format, right? And so that's exactly what happened, and changed the format, and it might change again, but having it, I think, would be a good idea. Send a good message.
Okay, so did we change the format a little? Was there somebody that wants to spearhead that? I can work with you to do that. Maybe any volunteers?
Sorry, my comment wasn't that we should change the format, just that when I looked at the last entry talking about the next community call, because I saw something in Discord saying the last community call got canceled, and the comment was that the format was likely going to change. And I think just having it a little more informal, a little shorter, where we do some short updates and ask people to be understanding is a change of format, and I think that's fine. And it would be good to have something, even if we don't, formally change the format. It just ends up being a little bit different.
Just very briefly, I also think that, sometimes it's good to just not to say we're going through a change, but I think, the people who will actually show up there are probably this group plus maybe one or two other people. And I think it's okay. Like, we could use this time to just keep having this conversation, right? These recordings are all public, so anybody who wants to see what we're talking about can see it anyway. So I think it's good to just shine some sunlight on this, and yeah, I don't know exactly what that looked like, but that would be my recommendation.
Tam, you're muted.
You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I didn't understand if that means you were in favor of it or not in favor of it.
Oh yeah, I think we should have it, and then I think just continue this conversation. Like do some updates and then open it up and talk about this. I don't know. Maybe we talk
My
in
feeling is
the.
that's not a community call, but I don't know. You mean use another time?
Let's talk about it on Stuart's channel.
I also like about the community calls that if you are not very active, you get in a single call what everyone is doing. So that's also very good. At least I haven't been very active in the past weeks, and I would love to hear from other people what they are working on.
Okay, so open question, community call, no community call. Let's continue async and arrive at a conclusion, hopefully before the community call. All right, see you guys.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.